Let's do an outdoor review. Thanks guys for coming back to the mcgolfshop even during the COVID stuff. If you guys aren't aware, Ohio is basically locked down. Essential personnel only are out there, and since I own my driving range and we're not deemed as essential, although some golf courses are open, we've shut down in order just to make sure that, or we shut down the range just to make sure that we can help do our part in reducing the spread. So onward. You saw that we brought in Mizuno, and I really like the look of both of these wedges, and I figured, well, let's find out what they are about. And so first we're going to try the 919. It has quad cut grooves. We'll look at that up and see what it says, what that means. I believe it's the thicker grooves for a larger bite. It has a bit of a rounded shape. Has a bit of a rounded shape on it, which is actually pretty pleasing. I don't like a lot of edges. It seems kind of compact for a wedge, which is, again, not such a bad thing. And it is a 55-degree club. If you look, it does have a bit of a bounce, and then the leading edge is curved or killed, as the case may be. And what I'm using is an Acra wedge shaft, so it's a little heavier than your average graphite club. It puts a lot of feel into the head, and then I have a mid-size grip on it. Thank you to FlightScope for providing the numbers. We're outside, so I'm using my iPad, and we'll talk about it when I'm done. So first and foremost, when I look behind the ball, it's very comfortable behind the ball. It's not, when I said compact earlier, it doesn't have that appearance of it. It's I would say it's very comfortable behind the ball. A little fat, and right up to about 70, 75 yards, not too bad. I wouldn't call that my best strike on the planet, but it's in the middle of the club face. Let's try a couple more. Nice and high ball flight. It's going pretty straight. That one's closer to 85. Now what I really like, when we talk about sand wedges, I think of sand wedges as finesse clubs. And I really don't like taking full swings because you can get in a lot of trouble. I like taking half swings. Still looking pretty good, right in that 75-yard range, which is what I expect. My gamer is about 75 yards on a half swing and about 100 yards on a full swing. Guys, so far I'm putting all these on a beach blanket. Feeling pretty good about it. Nice and straight down the middle, not too bad for the first time outside for the year. Let's get one more. I even kind of flared that one a little bit, and it still got out there. Still in that 75 to 80 yard range. I'm still right there with it. Let's see if we can throw one down a little bit. So with a little bit of a hood, I got it out to 95, 100 yards. It does what it says it's going to do. I'm not missing the middle of the club face. And like I told you when I reviewed this thing, when we talked about it, this is like the one I like that's really part of a set, which maybe not. One more. It's just so easy to hit. So very easy to hit. So if we look at this, hopefully you can see that I'm looking through some of my sunglasses, but all the spots are right there. I'm liking what I feel. It doesn't feel bad for a club that's not forged. So it's not truly a forged club, but man, oh man, and when I'm using a graphite shaft, which would take a lot of feel out of it, I like the way that it's hitting. All right, the Mizuno T20. The Mizuno T20 it appears to be a forged club. And if we look at it, a similar shape with just a slightly higher toe. You can see the grind on it on the top. It has a little more heel and toe relief A little wider sole for those guys that want to go after it. It just is a clean look too. Where there's a lot of shiny stuff on the 919, it looks a good look in the bag. This is just super duper clean, and it's a polished look. It's not chromed out. So you can regain, if it starts to get a little funky fade on there, you're pretty good. And this is a 56 degree. Let's see how we're gonna do this. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but it certainly had a, I won't say duller feel, just a softer feel, I guess is the way to go. 90, what does it say? 90 yards, a couple more like that, and then we'll tone it down some. Out to the 90-yard spot. And it's because I'm a little bit more loose too now, a little freer with the swing. I tell you what, there's something about the width of this. Now I'm not much of a divot taker per se, but I can get into a piece of it, but I'm not much of a divot taker. The wider sole in this, well, when I say wider sole, I don't mean like super wide, like there's some W grinds out there that are wide. I mean just wider than the 919. There's the 75-yard shot. Sure enough, right there. 75, it's right in there. I mean, it's very, very reliable. Now, I don't feel it coming off the face as much as I do the 919. That could be because of the fact that it's a little harder. Or the 919 is a little harder. That's a little bit better. It's more closer to the face, the center of the face, and it jumped out there a little bit. So if you see this one probably needs to be bent down a little bit, because if you look, I'm more into the heel, where the other one's probably a little flatter. This one, if I flatten this out, this would be right in the middle. So if we take a look at all these and how I hit, okay, and looking at this, I know you're not going to be able to see it, but I didn't take any of the open cuts, but both of the landing patterns were very, very tight, very on the center line. Now the T20, I had a pull shot there at the very end, but as a whole, they were very clustered, pretty much in about the same spot. As a whole, though, it still shows the ones that I hooded down and hit a little further and carried a little further, but as a whole, they're both in a very good clustered area. So as a whole, I'm about 25 foot in the air with the T-Zoid, and about the same with the other one. So I'm getting the same ball performance, and the 919 was producing just a slightly higher spin. I'm not getting a truckload of spin. I'm doing about 4,000 with the 919 and only about 3,700 with the T20. So not too bad all in all. I mean, that's using range balls and they're brand new and kind of greasy. But the ball was stopping. It could be because I was getting all the height. So let's go in and talk about how we're going to recommend this for some folks. And we're back into the review phase of the wedges. Now, we hit them outside. That was a first time thing. A bit of a technical difficulty in that I had the iPad, the machine, set to what was called short indoors, which is what's inside in my indoor facility. So what I did is I went back out and I sent it to the outdoor, so it tracks the ball all the way down to the ground. The performance really didn't change too much, but the spin rates did. When I'm telling you, around 4,000, I thought that was a little low, and it was. And we had some significantly different changes. So that's what we're going to kind of go over here, in that if you look from here and we see all of them, there we go, we're looking at it right there. And that was the Mizuno 919. Here comes the Mizuno T20. If we were to look at them in how they landed, if you look, they're pretty close, right? They're really close. The blue one is the T20 and the brown one is the 919. So what did I do? When I told you I was the flop shots I took out and the two big pull shots on both of them, I pulled that one out. This is what I ended up with. So some pretty decent, some pretty decent information. So if we take that and we just make it into regular numbers here, on the average with a 919 around 80 yards, which is exactly what we thought, and the T220 is just a little bit longer by a half a yard maybe, right at 80 yards. Now the big deal here was on the average with the T20, I had around 81 to, I had a low of like 79 and a high of 9,000, so 8,000 to 9,000, where on the 911 was about 6,200 to 7,000. So in effect, it was about 1,000 RPM less. And that's what we have for that. So when we get into, we look at this is some kind of fun stuff. If we, we get to play this, and if we have them all, there we go. Not too bad. Neat information that it's neat information that the flight scope gives us. And we can, we can make it, see how we wanted to go from here all the way back. If we wanted to get that, and there we are. And there's the 919 again. So again, who are we going to make these for, right? Bit of interruption because it was actually quite exciting. I was able to talk to Chris Vauchal, who is the R&D engineer for Mizuno. We had about a 2-hour conversation. First hour, of course, I did not record. I had my head somewhere where it shouldn't have been. And we got to talking a lot about Mizuno philosophy, construction techniques, just all kinds of really cool stuff. And we got to talk about the wedges, all right? This is part of the wedge. I'm interrupting the wedge review because it was so interesting. All right, we talked about I want to talk about two things: the quad cut grooves. Quad cut grooves is a term for the way that they are making the grooves in the heads. Now, what that means is, if you talk grooves, there are just so many rules on grooves, and you really have to pick one or the other. You can you're going to have a lot of grooves and they're going to be smaller and not nearly as deep, or you can have fewer grooves and they can be deeper and wider. I wish I recorded this part. It's the chicken or egg conversation. Does the groove create spin or does it remove debris? And I'm in the it removes debris camp. He is basically there as well. Is that to say that it doesn't help with a little bit of spin? Yeah. And from talking with Chris, in the more lofted clubs, they might play more of an impact because of the more glancing blow that you would create on it. Okay, I get that. The other part is when you're in either one of these clubs, that the grooves change, meaning that in the lower lofted irons, meaning the 50, 52, 54, that kind of stuff, that the grooves are different, right? They are different shapes, different depths, different everything, as opposed to the 56 and or the 60. Those have specific grooves versus the other ones, whereas the 48 to the 52-ish are more of a full swing club, so they don't need to impart great amounts of spin, so they have a different groove profile, different groove dimensions. Whereas the 55, 56, all the way to the 60 and plus have another deeper profile that that's to help move things around. And what it is that in between the grooves, right? In between the grooves, there is also a milling, and that milling works in concert with the grooves in order to help remove debris, and then it also has its coarseness in order to help impart spin. The guys will be able to tell you, not necessarily him, but if you had the same wedge and you had one with grooves and one without grooves, that they would virtually spin the same. So it's about face coarseness for those of us who don't necessarily pinch it perfectly like a robot would. And that's the reason why they're there to help. The other part is that this is truly a forged club, where this is more of a chromoly makeup, but both have their pluses. And we talked about in going further that they have different grooves. But I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about the wedges before I closed out the review. Again, both will do a great job. This is more for the guy that's more artistic, and this is more point, click, and chip. But both fine. Now, keep in mind the 919 is a little bit bigger, a little larger sole. doesn't have the reliefs on the toe and the heel. So it's for a guy that I like to call the point, click, and chip. All right, it's the guy that's going to sit down the club and he's going to just expect the wedge loft to work, as the loft is. Now you could open it up ever so slightly, but I wouldn't say a whole lot, and that's just to get you maybe over a little bit of a knoll, a little bit over maybe a small lip, maybe a shorter chip, something along that line. Where the T20 does have significant heel and toe relief, although the sole, it's all sole, it's not rounded in the back, but it does have heel and toe relief. Now what does that do? Well, when you go to flatten this out, the front end doesn't come up nearly as much, where it would be significantly higher on this one. All right, that's truly the difference. Now the feel, they are very comparable, to be sure, very comparable, but I felt that the T20, just a tad softer, had a different sound, more of a thud and less of a click. And that's purely a preferential thing. It doesn't bother me either way, one or the other, but I am one of those guys, although not very much of I consider myself an excellent player, but I am a guy that will take it and flop it open in order to get way up and over something. Now, not all the time. I'm very respectful of the conditions that I'm in, but I will put that shot in my bag in order to get it to go up and over something, or something that I have to just stop it really quick. That's one of those things that you can do. And the appearance of either one does not bother me. The 919 just a tad longer. The T20 is a little more compact, as we said. When you're looking at wedges, a couple of things you have to keep in mind is, what's the player type? Are we going to be point, click, and chip, or are we going to be a finesse player? Then what are we going to do? We're going to look at what kind of conditions does the player play in. Is it hard pan, soft, or some kind of combination of the two? That helps. And is it bumpy and you're going to have a lot of uphill or downhill shots? That also could take into effect. Then once you have the right shaft, the right line, the right grip, then you put all those together and you have a true short game weapon. All right, a true short game weapon. Quite impressed with the Mizuno irons, or the Mizuno wedges so far, and we're going to be testing the remaining lefty stuff. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about wedges or what they need to be fit, just put them in the show notes below. And let's see your scores go low.